We could just go, start over. Hey all, welcome to part 2 of the shop tour series. In this video, we will just look at the layout here of my workbench, the space I spend the bulk of my time, as well as bit into the entertainment section. Got to be out here all day. Got to have your entertainment going on, videos, music, so on and so forth. So just a little bit about how this space is set up and how I've created it as probably a spot that I spend the bulk of my time. So we'll look into that a little bit more in this video. All right, so this is where I actually spend probably the bulk of the time in my shop. It's the workbench where I'm either using this as a desk, I'm using this to work on just various small tasks, or if I worked on something in another area, it somehow lands here for final assembly. So this is really kind of one of my main areas. I would call it the center of the shop without necessarily being the center of the shop, but it works really well in this particular case. I think one of the most difficult things is, especially in a small space, is don't clutter it up, right? You put one thing down and instantly it feels like you have a mess, but also to make sure I have 360 accessibility as much as possible, right? I do have, like, here's my surface plate. It lives here on a permanent basis. I tend to always have, this is a magnetic chuck, but I actually use it to hold this little miniature kind of small case vise. I've also run my light in here, and this has just found its way to essentially almost always being here. I've got my bolted down Wilton vise. I can still access from here, but it's definitely a little bit more on the crowded side of things. You'll see that I have this piece in here, but this very quickly just, everything's on wheels, right? I can pull this up out of the way and I'm back to being able to work immediately alongside that side of the table on that piece. I also set up back in here, I've got kind of my reference material for pieces that I need. So whether it was a job I was working on and I've printed out or handwritten out, either one, that'll pop into a binder so that I have it for future reference if I'm going to work on something that is the same or somewhat relatively similar. I'm a nerd, so I do have my ham radio. I am a ham radio operator, so I also have my ham radio station set up in here. So 2 different radios for that piece. And then just mostly entertainment, right? So I grabbed an old laptop that I had laying around. I was trying to be cheap. I'm like, I don't really want to buy a TV. I also was like, I don't want to necessarily, put much money into this. And I was like, oh wait, I've got this old computer. I can go down and buy, I think I found a clearance monitor down one of the local stores, bought that, was able to hook that up. I already had the wireless mouse and keyboard left over from an old desktop that I was no longer using. So I just cannibalized all of this. And then I filter all the sound through this Makita speaker. And from there, I've got kind of all my entertainment. So YouTube's constantly playing. I'll have movies, I'll have music. Got to have those pieces in there, especially if you're out in your shop for kind of hours at a time. It could be whatever is on, right? So I really dig that. I also, I'm constantly looking things up. So that's where I appreciate having moved to the computer versus going with a TV, is that I could jump in, look something up pretty quickly, and get myself back onto things there. But again, I try to keep this whole area as clutter-free as possible. It's not entirely, right? I got random things. I got my 3D printed Grogu. I think it's the obligatory Grogu that we've got to have into there. I've got various pieces of just metal sitting up here, and it's just intended almost to be a little bit of a motivator, right? Pick up this piece, and where I was doing some heat treating and looking at it and picking up various colors, the blues and the purples and the tans, and I just, occasionally I'll just look at that as a way to motivate and get myself moving into things or come up with ideas on what I should be doing. I already tucked this thing up out of the way and moved this, but this is a Festool, which I'm not associated with them, but I picked up this Festool kind of like this folding. It's not really a workbench, but it's intended to be like you could throw down, full sheets of plywood, get those cut down. But what I've found, especially in here, because of the fact that it could collapse down really well, when I have my track saw set up, this can work really well to extend that workspace because it rides the exact same height as the Festool MFT table. So I run two of those back to back, or side by side actually. And then this, as needed, if I'm cutting a long sheet, I can extend this out and it kind of works as a good in feed, or I could flip it around to the outside and it can work as an out feed. We'll also look a little bit at my table saw. I set my table saw so that it rides at the exact same height as this. So again, it can serve as an in feed or an out feed for my table saw again. So trying to look at ways that I can multi-function this piece. I can also just, open this up just a little bit. It's big enough to go with a 4x8, but I could go, super small, throw a piece of board on here, and I've got this little small extension table to my workbench that's needed. And the fact that it just tucks up out of the way is totally awesome. Behind it, I've got a hydraulic table lift. Back blowout a couple of years ago, and again, one of my drivers to this company and to the shop was I was an avid motorcycle rider, and I mean thousands of miles a year, and had to break away from that when I hit a back injury and realized a 6-year-old and motorcycles don't always equate necessarily the biggest thing. And so I was like, I need to dig in a little bit more with hobby. But I also I can't always lift all this heavy stuff and make sure I maintain my back strength. So nice pickup on Facebook Marketplace was this hydraulic lift table. So it helps me, especially if I'm unloading stuff out of a truck or just moving some things around in here. Awesome casters, awesome lift capacity, gets to the right height. It's just about the height of all the stuff here, which is sitting right around that 35-inch height, which is what I try to keep it to, so it all works. So all that is crammed into here. I've got my fold-up table, I've got my workspace underneath, I've got my hydraulic lift table tucked over into the side here. I've got my small dust collector piece. So all that lives right here and works really, really well. Again, behind it, I've got all the entertainment piece, kind of resource center all in one, which is, again, closest to my main work area. So I work here. If I need to look something up, I could pop over and I could do so without kind of this long, excursion through the shop there. So that hits this area, right? And I think that this works really, really well, at least for my setup. All right, all. Thanks y'all for watching. Do appreciate that. Next video that we're going to kick off the part 3 is where we're going to look at kind of my multi-function station of all of them, right? Where we'll have everything from my welding table to where I do some of my woodworking. Also, it's all built around a motorcycle lift. So please join in on part 3 of the shop tour series.